Hi, and welcome to your Inside Power. I'm Patricia Stepler, and I'm your show host from Win Win Women for this particular show today. And we're talking about, do you control your results? And that's my question for you today. And I want to start with this quote by Zig Ziglar. I don't know if if you ever saw Zig Ziglar or heard about him, but he was an amazing speaker. And I had the opportunity to hear him speak on a number of different occasions. But he said, you don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. And that's exactly what we need to do when it comes to actions and results. We don't have to know all the answers. We don't have to know exactly what we need to do. We just need to start taking action and take action on a daily basis. So your greatness starts from within inside of you. It doesn't start outside of you. So often we think that our results and everything that happens to us comes from the outside world. It all starts from the inside. And your self-image is one of the largest parts when we need to think about, who we are and our results. Who are you? What are your results? So your greatness starts from within you when you begin to know who you are. Do you know that most people never really take time to figure out who they are? They allow other people, the outside world, to tell them who they are. And sometimes it happens inadvertently. Your parents or your family may say things and you decide, oh, that's who I am. But it doesn't have to be who you are. And it may not be who you really are at all. And then we go to school and, there may be some type of guidance counselor that maybe talks to you and they say try to get you to think about who you are, but you may use the conception of all these other people and what they think you are or who they think you are instead of who you are. And, so often we never really know who we are. And I know I was that way. I allowed the outside world to dictate what I was even going to do for a career because I didn't know. So I was like, oh, well, my grandparents were teachers. My parents were teachers. I'll just be a teacher. And was that who I was? I don't know. Because when I was in college, I really wanted to go into business. So who was I really? So we have to be really careful and figure out who we are. What is it that we really want? And realize that you can change your own reality. If you feel like the life you're living now isn't who you are, you can change it. And you can decide who that reality is going to be and what kind of life you're going to live. Keep in mind, everything you have right now, you have created. Whether you believe it or not, you have created it. And so that means if you've created what you are right now, that means then you can create something different if you so choose. So what would you feel like if you accomplished your dream? Well, first we have to know what our dream is, because if we don't know who we are, we don't know what we want. So that first thing, that's why it's so important to know who we are. Then we can start to think, well, what is it that I want? And I always tell my clients, let's think of 3 different things. What do you want? Things you want. What do you want to be? And what do you want to do? And we can think of it that way and break things down like that. And we can start to really plan our life. Well, what do I want to do? What do I want to have? Where do I want to go? That might be another one if you like to travel like I do. Where do you want to go? I have a whole list on my wall of the places that I want to go. And so we have to know those kind of things. So what do you really want? And the only way you're going to figure out what you really want is to figure out who you are and what kind of things you want. But what would you be doing well, how would you feel if you've accomplished those goals? How would that make you feel? And that's what you have to start thinking about. How the emotions of how you feel. And then what would you be doing today to move towards that goal? So once we know what our goal is, we've taken some time to figure out who we are, we've maybe meditated upon it, journaled on it, and now we're going to start thinking about, okay, what am I going to do today to get to that point? Because you see, if you don't do something different, you're not going to end up anyplace different. That makes sense, right? So we have to decide who we are, what we want, and then what we need to do today. And then we have to start visualizing that. Start visualizing, what the goal is, how it makes us feel, what might we have to do differently, and start picturing it. And when you start to picture it, you can even hold conversations in your head, talking to somebody else, telling about what you're doing. Maybe you're talking about your achievement. And see, all that can become very real, because remember, the subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between real and imagined. So if you start picturing something that you're imagining, it just thinks you're already doing it. And that's how you achieve those bigger goals. You see yourself already there. You have the emotions of having achieved it. So the subconscious mind thinks that you're already there, and it just helps you get there or to stay there. And that's what we have to do. So we have to come up with a plan. Now, earlier in the week, and if you've gone back to one of my early episodes, I talked about how my son manifested his full college scholarship, and he didn't do anything he should have to accomplish it. He didn't know what he was doing. He just unconsciously followed a lot of these steps. And I was reading the book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, and I was really thinking about it. How did he do this, not knowing any of this information? And that happens. Napoleon Hill has examples in the book of people who followed these steps, didn't know what they were doing, but they unconsciously did that. You may have done that also. I know I have done it in the past and didn't know that. But I started to really hone in on what it was he did. And you see, he took a dream. He took the dream of being a collegiate athlete on a full scholarship. And he so embedded that dream in his subconscious mind. He thought about it all the time. He certainly told me about it all the time. And he just got that idea to become a burning desire. And that's what Napoleon Hill says you need to have, that you must have a burning desire. It can't be just a mere wish or a dream. It has to become a burning desire. Well, how did it become a burning desire? Well, for him, once he told me that's what he was going to do, in his mind, in his 12-year-old brain, he thought, well, I just told my mom this is what I'm going to do. I better figure out how I'm going to do it. So what did he do? He came up with a plan. And that's what we need to do. We need to set that goal, come up with a plan, and then take action. Now, before I realized what he had done, see, back when he was in 6th grade, the coach he was working with at the time, his baseball coach, told him he didn't want him to lift weights, that he was too young, didn't want him to do that, didn't want him to do anything that might harm his body, okay, in that way. So my son used to, after dinner, he'd go up to his bedroom and he'd be up there maybe 30, 40 minutes, and then he'd come down. And this happened every single day. I never asked him what he was doing until maybe 2-3 months later. He goes, Mom, you know what I do when I go up to my bedroom? I said, no, I've always kind of wondered, but, was giving him his privacy. He says, I've been doing push-ups. And he'd lean on his his bed, his footboard, and he would be doing presses and all kinds of stuff, not lifting any weights, but he was doing whatever he could to continue to strengthen his body without lifting weights. And then we'd ask him different times, for his birthday or for Christmas, or maybe, Valentine's Day, or sometime when I was going to buy him something, what would you like? And he'd come up with these things like perfect push-ups. That was one time he wanted another time he wanted something that was like a running, like a parachute on the back of him. And that would give him this resistance so that he would run faster, things like that. This kid's really a bit odd, but you see, he had this dream and he was making a plan. He knew he had to be faster. He knew he had to be stronger. And so he was doing things and setting up routines, going upstairs every night after dinner. He was set up a routine that he was working on him. Now, if you have to do something like that, and then you end up getting a scholarship because you've put in all this work, what if we did the same things with our thinking and we control our thinking? And we're going to come up with ideas like he did as to what we need to do to accomplish our dream. You see, those ideas were given to him. He thought about it and they were given to him. That's exactly what we need to do. Same thing happened to me when I was in a similar type position where I unconsciously did these things. Ideas came to me and I took action upon them and they worked and I accomplished my goal. That's the process. And if we just understand it, we can make it happen all the time. So most of the time, your goal starts as a wish or dream. And, when it first crosses your, the ether and it comes into your head, you may not think that much about it. Oh, that'd be kind of neat, or that would be fun. And then you may dismiss it. And then maybe a couple of days later, or a week later, or 2 weeks later, you think, that would be kind of neat. And you start to think about it. Well, as you start to think about it, it goes from that wish to a desire. And when it becomes that burning desire that you have to have it, that's when you really go into action. But you have to develop a clear mental image of what it is. It can't be something vague. And this is why sometimes when people say goals, I want to make more money, or I want to earn more money. But they never set an amount. Well, a penny is more. $1 is more. That's surely not what you want. And so we have to start being very specific and get clear on the image of what it is we want. Maybe it's a new car. What kind of car? See yourself in that car. Maybe go to the car dealership and take a picture of you. Take a selfie of you beside that car. And start really creating the image of what it is that you want, because those abstract ideas are unclear and they're not going to make it. Or if you say something that's kind of opposite of what you really want, you see, they'll come to you just as quickly. So you have to be very, very careful that you have it exactly what you want and it's clear. And then have a target date. When's your target? Now, you may not know for sure, and the universe has its own ideas. For my son, it was easy. He told me at 12, when he was 18, that's when he was going to graduate high school. So 6 years. And, for other goals, we may set, I want it by the end of the year, I want it by March or whatever, but we don't know for sure. And what we have to keep in mind is that there's a gestation period for everything. And we don't always know that gestation period. If you think of the animal kingdom, each animal has a different gestation period from the time that you have an embryo until the baby's born. Well, dreams and goals have that same thing. So we set a target date. We may get it before, it may come later. We don't know. But we have to realize that the goal has to be paired by an action, because if it's not paired with any action, it is simply a dream or a wish. So if you really want to turn that idea or dream into a goal, you have to start taking action, because as long as you do nothing to move towards it, it's not going to come to you. But as you start to move towards your goal, it starts to move towards you. It happens every single time. So fear, worry, doubt, anxiety, when you allow them to interfere with the actions that you're taking or the idea, the goal that you have, that's like putting the brakes on. And as long as you're allowing those emotions, those ideas, those invisible negative things to come into your life, you're actually stopping the good that you want in your life. So we need to really try to get rid of this. How do we do that? Action. When you move towards the thing you fear and you take some type of action, it starts to go away because it loses its power. And when it loses its power, then you start to see the other side and you start to move towards it. So sometimes the very thing you want to do, those negative emotions are trying to keep you from that. And so you just have to push through it. So I wanted to give you some common pitfalls or common things that happen to people as they start to move towards their goal, or the reason they don't get the goal. So if you've had a goal and you may be sitting there, because I know I have, you start to think, gee, I've had this goal and it's not coming. What, this doesn't work. This goal setting doesn't work. So I want to give you some reasons as to why that can happen. One of the big ones is the clarity. You may have actually reached the goal. And you might say, well, no, it couldn't be. Well, yeah, it could be, because here's what happens. You have this abstract idea of what you want. And so you're kind of there, but not really. But because it wasn't clear and it wasn't clarified, you actually did get it. So think back at times when maybe you didn't get the goal that you wanted. Maybe you wanted a certain kind of car, but you just said, I just want a different car. Well, maybe you got, instead of getting this brand new, great car that you really wanted, you ended up getting a used car, but it's a different car. Well, you did reach your goal. You see, you weren't clear on exactly what you wanted. You may have at one moment thought it'd be nice, but because you just said, I just want a different car, you got a different car. It just wasn't the different car that you really would have liked to have had, because you didn't clarify it. So use a journal and write down all the ideas of the things that you want, and start really thinking about them. And each day, just keep journaling until it becomes clear and you really do figure out who you are and what you want. You have to get emotional about it. And to have a goal that you can get emotional about, it's what we call a C-type goal. We have A, B, C types of goals. A C-type goal is one that really inspires you to take action. An A goal is something you can get. A B goal is, if this happens and this happens and this happens, I'll get it. But a C-type goal is one of those goals where it kind of excites you and scares you at the same time, because it's what you really want, but you don't know how you're going to get there. And so, but they inspire you because they stir the emotions and they make you become somebody that you're not presently. And see, those are the kind of goals that really inspire you to become more. And that's really what a goal is all about. It's not so much about getting this or getting that. It's who you become as you're moving towards it. So what we have to do is you have to know what we want and what we don't want, and make sure we're asking for what we really want. And we have to have that inspirational goal. And then we have to break the tendency to get out of our comfort zone. And that's huge. And sometimes I don't think we realize how big that is. Our brains have been wired to keep us safe. And in so doing, when they were wired that way, keeping us safe, they want to prevent us from going out after something that's new and different, because it could be scary, because we don't know how to do it. And so our brains are actually wired to keep us comfortable. We have to fight that tendency to be comfortable so that we can actually get to the place where we want to be. So we have to break that tendency. And sometimes we think if something's too big and too overwhelming, then we tend to get to the point where we don't know what to do, and then we take no action. So we have to find that like sweet spot. We don't want it so big that we do nothing. We don't want this goal so small that we do nothing, because it's not exciting. We have to find that kind of even spot. So sometimes if you really have a huge, huge, huge goal, you may have to break it down and decide, okay, maybe my brain can't deal with that great big goal. So if we break it down and maybe cut it in half, I can see that goal. So let me give you an example. Suppose you want to earn $1 million, but you're earning 10,000 now. That's a huge jump to $1 million from 10,000. And your brain can't handle that. So what you might want to do is say, okay, $1 million, that's where I really want to be. But right now, if I say $1 million, I'm not going to do anything, because it's so big and so unbelievable, my brain won't even function. So maybe you want to say, let's do 100,000. And then when you get to 100,000, okay, I've done that. Now I can go 250. Well, now get to 250. Now I can get 500. And then I can get to 1 million. And you've broken that down. And sometimes we need to do that. But if it's too small, if you say, if you're earning 10,000, you say, oh, I want to earn 11,000. That's just not exciting enough to go after. So we have to find that sweet spot. And then we have to start visualizing it. And you even need to visualize the obstacles. You know, make it a game. And you're playing around with thinking of what could go wrong. What would I do when this goes wrong? And you keep figuring out what happens. And when you get to a real obstacle that gets in your way, how am I going to get around it? Don't give up. That's the other thing people do. They tend to give up. The first 1 or 2 obstacles that gets in your way, and you think, oh, I can't do it, and you give up. No, don't do that. You've got to keep pushing forward. Map out a plan. Have a game plan of what you think you're going to do, understanding that that may change, because you don't know everything the universe knows. And that's what happened to my son. He mapped out this game plan and he was checking the boxes off. You know, things were going really well until they didn't. And he thought he'd lost his entire goal. And fortunately, because he had his own little mastermind group, which we didn't realize, but my husband and I were helping him. And he started to realize, okay, that's just an obstacle. And we figured it out and we moved on. And the thing is, that obstacle, what appeared to be an obstacle, was really the answer. So sometimes the obstacle becomes the answer or the solution to what you're seeking. So for him, the obstacle meant he had to go someplace else and play with a different team to get to the result. So keep that in mind. What we're really doing is changing us on the inside. We are changing who we really are. So you need that big goal. You need to understand those obstacles. You need to visualize. You need to act. And as Wallace D. Wallace says in his book, The Science of Getting Rich, when you accomplish something great, you have to do things. You have to think differently, think in a certain way, as he calls it, and you have to act in a certain way. And that certain way is by following these strategies or the laws of the universe. Maybe you've heard this. Hope is not a strategy. That's why you have to have a plan. Hope's not a strategy. You've got to develop the plan that you want. Now, I certainly want to help you to get to that point. So I want you to keep in mind, if you have a big goal and you're not sure how to get it and you would like some help, reach out to me. I do have my chat there. You can schedule time on my calendar and we can have a 15, 20-minute chat about where it is you want to go. And I'll see if I'm the right person, or maybe I might know somebody that is the right person, or maybe in a network of people I know, I can find you the answer for what it is that you're seeking. So please go ahead and schedule that time and let's have a discussion and see where it might lead you, because everybody deserves to live their dream. That's the one gift we were given. We have the ability to think, we have the ability to act, and we should do that to accomplish the goals that we really want. So keep in mind what Zig Ziglar said. You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. So where are you going to start? This is Patricia Stepler with your Inside Power. Make it a great day.